Related to business, that is through the BG5 program, through the OC16 program, ways in which the mechanics themselves can be so useful in terms of an economic environment, to make things more viable, to create better associations, to better understand how to motivate people, how to get them to communicate, all of these various things that are inherent in business consulting, but business consulting that's seen through human design. This September, I'm going to begin what ultimately I hope will be a sociology department of human design, rave sociology. And to be able to teach basically what I'm going to share with you this weekend, but obviously to elaborate it, but really to begin a process of, how can I put this? Most of my work has been about the individual. And everything about the individual is about the transformation of your own unique process through your own authority, all of these kinds of things. But the reality is that the world is dominated by trans-auric forms. Most of the things that we think are ugly in human beings aren't in your personal chart, have never been in your personal chart. But they come alive in trans-auric forms. We are all born in Pentas. We live in them. We create them. We walk around in WAs. We're in a WA in this room. Trans-auric forms have a way in which they condition humanity. And for me, rave sociology is very important to understand the way in which we are conditioned. Everything about human design, everything that I've been teaching all of these years is about conditioning. After all, this is the Maya. The Maya is this vast, dense conditioning field. And the moment that you understand the way in which trans-auric forms operate, you can really begin to understand the world around you and why human beings are the way they are. See, most of the time, we're so busy looking at a person and saying, you're to blame. But you know, the moment that you're in a family situation, as an example, the moment you're in a group of 4 people that are enjoying themselves at a table in a restaurant, you've got different rules. They're totally different. They're so different that it's almost frightening in a way. I mean, for me, Penta, as an example, is the ultimate science fiction. I mean, it's the ultimate science fiction, really. I remember as a kid seeing a black and white movie called, I think it was called The Tingler. The Tingler. And it was about these creatures that came from outer space. It was a really bad movie, by the way. And in a movie theater, of all places, all of a sudden these creatures are crawling up people's spines and getting into their bodies and taking them over, you know, and running them. And it's something to understand about us. We assume that we're at the top of the heap, you know, the vanity of the mind, that we control things and all of this stuff. But the reality is that we are being controlled by things that we cannot see, that we have no conscious access to, that the average human being never has any fundamental awareness about at all. Think about what it's like to go home. You know, to go home to your original family. Think about what it's like. Think about how you feel when you go back into that environment. Think about all the things that come back that you don't like. All of those things that are suddenly there in your personality that you thought you had left behind that suddenly return. That the way in which you're being dealt with is no different than it ever was, regardless of whether you're 12, 50, or 80. This is the program. This is what Penta does. And you see, we're all unique. Not everybody belongs in such a thing. I mean, the reality is that there are people who are born to be Penta people. They really are. They're born for it. They're perfect for it. The moment they get into a group, they find themselves. There are those people who have absolutely no connection whatsoever to Penta. And for them, in any group situation, in any small group dynamic, they are totally at the mercy of what is going on around them, and there is nothing they can do. It's one of my standing jokes. I'm a terrible Penta person. I have great power sitting alone in my integration as an alpha, you know? But you put me in a Penta, and I'm at the low end of the totem pole. It doesn't matter what I have to say. It doesn't matter what I know. None of those things matter because the Penta takes over. And the Penta says, excuse me, in the Penta we have no ajna or head center. You're an idiot. Shut up. You know, we don't care about what you have in your design. It doesn't make a difference. If it doesn't fit here into our little Penta story, it doesn't count. And this is the way we live. And you see, because most human beings have no real understanding of that, they assume that what's going on inside of that Penta is them. So that relationship that changes in their relationship with the other, you know? In the moment that relationship changes, they go back home. They get into the same argument with the same sibling, parent, whatever it is, that they've always had. They always end up at the same place, and they think it's them. They'll blame the other. You never change. You never grow up. You never get, all of this stuff. But it's the constraint of the Penta. Okay, so what is a Penta? Let me give you a picture. What you're looking at here, this is the pentagraph that we use. This is the construct that we use in order to be able to map out mechanically what a penta is. First of all, a penta is an auric entity. It's auric. It's not like us. It's not. When I was given the design of forms, because I was given the design of forms, it started from the inanimate and slowly it built up in terms of all of these enclosed auras. The insect and plants and fish and mammals and so forth and so on, and us. But the two auras that are trans-auric, they're very different because they're not bioforms. They're not biological. A penta is not made of flesh. It isn't. It's an auric construct. It is built out of your energy field. That's all. So the first thing to understand about a penta is that you can't think of it the way you think about us. It doesn't work that way. It isn't like us at all. And the thing about a penta as well is that it's not fixed the way we are. We have a fixed genetic code that keeps us basically in line with our genetic information. But a penta doesn't do that. A penta is morphic. It morphs all the time. You got 3 people in a room, you got a penta. One goes out, the penta disappears. Another person comes in, it's a different penta. You've got 3 people in a room, you got a penta. Another person comes in, you got 4 people, the penta changes. It's always changing. One person goes out, one person comes in, whatever the case may be. The penta is not rooted in the flesh. It's rooted in the aura. In the aura. I think one of the most difficult things for most people to understand is that the aura isn't an emanation that we put out as much as it is the enclosing shell that defines us. Many of you know in my work in human design, I try to get people to understand type through aura, because it's actually the aura that is expressing the type. The closed aura of a manifester, the enveloping aura of a generator, the focused aura of a projector. It is in the aura itself. The aura is carrying all of our essential ingredients. It is the expression of what we are. And it is our aura that connects us to the Maya. We're not connected by the flesh. We are connected through our auras to the world around us, to others that are around us. And the fundamental intimacy of human beings is rooted in the impact of 2 auras meeting. We see that when you take 2 designs and you bring them together, how powerful that aura connection is, because it connects all of that fundamental information. It's there in the aura. So think about a penta. What a penta does is it taps into any present auric field. Right now we're a wah. If this room got reduced down to below 8 people, there would no longer be a wah here. And wah mechanics would no longer exist. And if this room distilled down to 2 people, there would be no penta, there would be no wah, there would only be partnership. In other words, it is constantly morphing. In fact, we're rarely out of them. And it is one of the things that is so, well, I was going to say frightening, but I don't mean to be dramatic in that sense. I spent 2 years teaching OC16. I don't think I've ever had a more bizarre experience than teaching and exploring and understanding what Wa does to us. It is extraordinary how we are controlled through these forms. Today, and in our program, what I'm going to do is in these morning sessions, I'm going to share with you background information. In the afternoon session, I'm going to take you each through your dynamics relative to the form. So, for example, this afternoon, I'm going to look at all of your Penta dynamics. I'm going to show you some extraordinary things that may be very surprising to you about what happens to you when you end up in a Penta. But first, let's understand the mechanism itself. When you're looking at this illustration over here, the first thing to grasp is that what you're really looking at is the throat to the G to the sacral. If you look at this drawing, the brown at the top there, this is derived from what we call the throat center. And in the center, the yellow band, this is derived from the G center. And at the bottom, the red here, this is derived from the sacral. Now, if you look at that, you can also see that we're talking about 6 channels, 12 gates. We all know these 12 gates, right? They're the gates that exist, what we call the power column in an individual, the gates that exist and the channels that exist between the sacral center and the throat center. That's actually what you're seeing here. So when you think about a Penta, and you think about what it is, the first thing is, what isn't it? What doesn't it have? It doesn't have an immune system. It's not biological. No immune system. It doesn't have an emotional system. So it's not caught up in all of that at all. It doesn't have an ajna center. So first of all, when you're looking at a Penta, you're not looking at a hell of a lot of intelligence at work. You're not. I mean, that's not what Penta is all about. You know, Penta is the dumb person that is running is a supervisor in some department. I mean, Penta doesn't have to be smart to run the show. It really doesn't. It is not a thinking thing. It isn't. It is a control mechanism. See, everything's about control. I mean, everything's about control. Politics, religion, wherever you want to look. It's all about control. How do we control human beings? And basically this whole drive in humans to control other humans is what they got out of Penta, what they get out of Wa. It's all a control mechanism. So here, what you're looking at is the way in which we get controlled that has nothing to do with our basic intelligence. Nothing. What is the Penta about? It's rapacious. Penta is the ultimate material entity. It's why we're all born in them. Penta is about making money. It's why I taught it as business. Oh yes, I also taught it as family practice because it is the same dynamic. But every family, as we well know, is a business. If a family doesn't make money, the children don't eat, and so forth and so on, and all of the things that go with that. Everything about the Penta is the Penta has one thing and one thing only that it does. It pushes us towards materialism. It's its main drive. And in pushing us towards materialism, it tries to control the way in which, first of all, we raise our children. Because all of our children are raised in Pentas. I mean, it used to be that all of our children were raised in Was. When we had families that were 9, 10, 12, 15, 20. The Penta is just a breakdown of this at a more modern level, that the common family today is a pentic family. But this is control. And if you're raised in a Penta, you think it's your parents that are controlling you? It's one of the great jokes of Penta. If you look up there in the far left at the top where it says administration, right? That's all about, in the family chart, it's about discipline basically. Same thing in the business chart, but it's, but discipline. But who has that? You see, in a Penta, it's what you've got in the Penta that counts. So let's say you're in a family of 4 and you've got 2 children and your children activate that and the parents don't. Guess who's the boss in the family? The children. And it doesn't matter whether the parents are, I'm the boss here, and the kids are snickering, And the parents think, aren't these miserable kids? It's not their fault that that's what they have in the Penta, and that they're telling their parents what to do, and their parents think it's a fault in the child, It's just the Penta. Nothing more. You see, we have this assumption. It's the vanity of what it is to be a human being. This incredible vanity of being a human being. I'm in charge. I take care of this. I do that. If I want this, I'm going to get that. I'm going to make this happen and that and all this stuff. You see, there's so very, very, very little maneuvering space for that fantasy in reality. Because in reality, we're all in these various constructs. And it's not about somebody that understands their own nature, that operates according to their strategy and authority. You can navigate in the Maya as yourself and not be trapped in the decision-making as a result of conditioning, but you cannot escape it. Ever. Had a great experience this past April when we were doing the event in Toronto. And my soon-to-be 99-year-old mother lives nearby. And I went out for a family gathering, and it was so bizarre. It's so bizarre for me to go back into a family Penta, because I can feel all these things going through my system that were always there. My older sister came over, and, the relationships that you have as a child and all of those things and the way it worked within the family and all of that. And it didn't matter that I'm 62 and she's 75 and my mother's 98. It was a horrendous joke. Same old program. And it doesn't matter that I'm Uru Hu and I'm smart and aware and all that shit. Same old program. You can't do anything about it. You can smile at it, which is what I did, because what else can you do? It's still the same program. And you see, most people just don't get that. And it creates a lot of pain. And it creates a lot of confusion. Think about those parents with, the child that because of the Penta has some kind of attribute they don't like. Oof. That poor child, they're going to be conditioned from day one, therapies and this and that, problems. And the moment they leave home, if they haven't been so heavily scarred by all of that early conditioning, they'll be okay. They'll get the chance, at least, to begin to step into who they are. Pentas are so powerful. And you see what happens. You're this kid, and you finally get out of the house and you want to be on your own. Where do you go? You go into a communal house with 7 other kids. You just go into another Penta. And from that you go into the classroom where you go into another wall. And to the party where there's another one. And it goes on and on and on and on. And you don't know that who you are isn't potentially flowering in that. Remember, potentially. We have different kinds of human beings. I mean, in this group, because I've seen, we have people who are absolute Penta people who are absolutely not. It's about being aware. If you understand, first of all, whether or not the Penta works for you, that's the first thing. It is something that's really important. If you're going to decide to, work things out in groups, and you're not a Penta person, this is just plain dumb. It isn't going to work. I mean, it's just not going to work. And there's no point in doing that. It doesn't mean you have to give up and surrender. It means what I like about mechanics is that you can turn mechanics into tools, into techniques. If you're not a Penta person, then you got to deal with people one-on-one. I mean, it's the only way it's going to make sense. So if you're that parent and your child is the one that has the discipline in the Penta, don't try to discipline them when everybody's together, because it isn't going to work. Take them aside. Take them into a personal aura with you so that you can communicate with them and communicate with them as they are and not get trapped. Okay, so let's talk about the dynamics of Penta, because I think Penta is one of those things that's When I first started to teach it, I wanted people to have a sense of it. Let's think about how this works. First of all, the mechanics of Penta. Penta is deeply connected to the genetic imperative of reproduction. It's why it's so integral to family. And Penta is based on 3. That is, the minimum is 3. If you have a partnership is a very, very locked-in thing. And it's a very intense auric connection between 2 beings. But the moment that you bring in the 3rd, everything changes. So think about the young couple. Right? They have their relationship. Their relationship is based on their partnership, whatever the partnership dynamics happen to be. And of course, if they're not self, we know what that is. It's all about being connected to, what's attractive that they don't have and all of those various things. Okay, so you've got that. And then they have a child. And the moment you have a child, you go directly into the Penta. And the moment you go directly into the Penta, you immediately have the problem, because the Penta is designed to give you problems if you're a 3. Because triangles are terrible things. If you're 3 people and you're sitting at a table, you're never really going to achieve very much. You see, it's about eye contact. When you have 3 people sitting together, only 2 of them can actually connect to each other. Somebody is always left out. It creates a tension. Think about the tension that arises in a young couple. They have their first child. They're that early Penta, and there is always this, why aren't you paying attention to me? The husband is concerned that the wife isn't paying enough attention to him because she's paying all the attention to the baby, and so forth and so on. All of these things that go into it. The reality is that there is simply a tension that is built up. The couple wants to put the baby to sleep so the 2 of them can be together so they can get out of the tension. The husband wants to race off to work in the morning, or the wife, whatever the case may be, wants to race off to get out of the tension, because the 3's a tension. No matter how much joy that baby brings, there is this tension, and the tension works in the biology. It's not just psychological. Look, we've got a huge problem, for example, in Europe. Spain as an example. Technically speaking, if you don't count immigration, Spaniards are dying out. They reproduce at the lowest rate in Europe, I think 1.2 per couple. And you've got to have a 2.4 or a 2.5 rate to reproduce. You've got to reproduce yourselves as well as add to the population. And Spain has the lowest rate of all. Well, slowly but surely they all die out. It's why the governments in Europe, up until the recession, were paying enormous amounts of money to try to get women to have children, because the tribes of Europe are dying. So the Penta is very much into family, right? Basically what Penta is all about is that every Penta that comes into the world wants to dominate the world gene pool. Do you realize that half of all the men in the world are descended from Genghis Khan? Now that's a Penta that worked. That's a gene pool that really spread. All this is about gene pool. You're building a gene pool. It's highly competitive. That's one of the things to really understand about it. To build a quality gene pool, to move forward materially, educate them, discipline them, get them into the world, all of this thing in order to make them more successful. Because Penta is about continuity as well, as I'll show you. So 3, Penta says, we have a tension here. 3 is not good. 3 is not good. We need one more. 4 is really good. 4 is a really nice number. Look at a table where 3 people are sitting. They're having, they're out in a cafe, and there's 3 of them together. And one of them is bored all the time. And one of them really isn't in it. Or it alternates, but basically it's sort of an uneven phenomena. And then somebody they know comes by and sits down. And suddenly it's a 4. Peace on earth. Everybody is so content. People can talk to each other. Nobody's left out. It's like the 4 legs on a table. You don't want a 3-legged table. 4-legged table, stable, comfortable. Everybody's relaxed. Everybody's got somebody to communicate with. So the Penta is saying, look, 4 is good. 3 is bad. 4 is good. 3 is a start. But 4 is really good. Okay, so you get to 4. Stable, healthy. Penta says, we got a problem. We got a problem. What if one of your kids is gay? What if one of them decides to become a priest? God forbid one of them dies, or they don't want to have children, or whatever the case may be. We need some insurance. This is what Penta is all about. Penta is about insurance. Right? Insurance that the bloodline is going to continue, that the genetic pool is going to grow, that it's going to succeed. So when Penta finally stops pressuring is the moment you get to 5. And the joke is, of course, that the moment you get to 5, you always have a problem. Always. Always. See, the 5 wants more because the 5's got its own problems. It can be a 4 and a 1. Most of the time when you have a household and you're a 5, somebody's always missing. Really, somebody's always missing. Where's George? Not here. Where's Sally? Not here. Somebody's always missing so that there's a stable 4. And there's always that freak, the black sheep, the one that doesn't fit in. Sometimes it's just the one who works. Just not there. Somebody's missing. That 5 also breaks down into a 3 and a 2. So you end up with tension that's inherent in the family. And the 2 is usually the parents. So the siblings begin to compete with each other. The moment you have a 5, the youngest is already competing with the oldest. And Penta has a thing about age. When you see a Penta program, the moment that you put all the names into a Penta program, it automatically organizes them according to age. Automatically. Because Penta has respect for age. It's just one of those things. And it gives precedence in a way to age, which is often a problem, by the way. For example, in business analysis, you can have 5 employees, for example, in a department, and the eldest happens to be the worst employee with the worst habits. And they have inordinate influence over the others. So there are many things that are built in because Penta basically is a family construct. It's basically about bringing human beings into the world and controlling them. Controlling them. So that they do nothing but generate what is in essence that Pentic identity and manifest it out in the world. Pentas show off. Pretentiousness is not personal and human. You will not find a single line in the 384 lines of the Rei Vi Ching, and I know I wrote them, that says anything about pretentiousness. It's a Penta attribute. Nothing to do with us. Pentas are pretentious. They show off their new cars and the clothes of their children and, all this kind of stuff. In other words, the Penta is always demonstrating to everybody, look, we are the gene pool. Think about neighborhoods, classic suburban neighborhoods. Wow, is that frightening? But anyway, think about it. You got all these Pentic families there, and they're all in competition. I had one of the most bizarre experiences of that. Years ago, I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was there for 3 weeks. And I was doing a series of teaching and stuff. And I was staying at somebody's house in one of these, these new developments, new suburban areas in Santa Fe. The day after I came there, I watched out the window a whole bunch of kids, all excited, putting up a basketball thing in a driveway of one of these houses. By the end of the 3 weeks, there were 6 or 7 of them that had been put up on the street. This is Penta. Do you know what that's like? You live in one of these areas and you've got a neighbor that never paints their house, never cuts their lawn. You know what kind of problems that creates? The whole Pentic thing comes to the surface. We're here to demonstrate our viability and success as a biological group, and this one's no good. There's Penta. They're incredibly competitive. When you think about families, that turn into tribes. Why do you think one tribe hates the other tribe? All tribes hate each other, eh? I mean, forget about the politically correct niceties, that we've developed intellectually over the last 100 years. You scratch the skin of any tribe and say, what do you think of that tribe next door? And they go, they come out of a different bloodline. It's a different bloodline. And Penta says, hate that tribe. Well, it should be that strong. Don't like them. Penta says, your own tribe is it. See, we think this is us. When you have a madman that's the head of some tribe that wants to kill all the other tribes, we think we're to blame. Human beings are really bad creatures. They're really ugly. They're terrible. They're capable of horrible things. That's Penta. And it's Penta through Wa. Wa kills people all the time. Soldiers, paramilitaries, gangsters, mobs, gangs, you name it. These are all Was. And though their tribes are artificial, it doesn't make any difference because within the Wa mechanics, it feels like their family. It feels like their tribe. And so, yes, they'll say, oh, no, that tribe's no good over there. And then they blame human beings. It's not human beings. It's the control mechanisms that are placed on us. That without awareness, we are absolutely helpless. Absolutely. Okay, so how does it do it? If you look over here, right here, this is the 15th gate in somebody's design. And for those of you that are really familiar with, gate knowledge, the 15th gate is known for its magnetism. It's the gate of extremes. And the channel 15.5 is very magnetic. It pulls people into a flow. This is the channel of being in the flow, channel of rhythm. It pulls people in. The 15th gate acts as a pulling in agent, if you will, of the auric field. So in the Penta, it's here in this zone of the 15 that the auras are being pulled in together. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're a group of 4 people. You're sitting at a table and there's no 15. You're not going to last long as a group. You'll sit down together and without understanding why, in that sense, things are going to happen that simply will allow that group to easily dissolve. Even though it's a 4, even though it's stable, there's nothing holding it together. That 15 acts as an agent of pulling everything in magnetically and beginning this process of pulling in the magnetic energy that is going to be the Penta. It's all inherently here in the middle, in the G center. In other words, this is where the central system is. Let me have let's see here. It's called the vortex. Oop, that wasn't any good. It's called a vortex. This image that you're looking at over here, this is the way the image was originally given to me in my experience. I was given all the forms in the beginning. And what you're looking at here is a deconstructed graphing of this. But that's actually the actual drawing in that sense that I was given, or at least the way in which it was visualized for me. And it helps you by looking at this image over here, that is the image behind me, to really see the mechanism of how this works. That magnetic field that you see that's down here, that's actually the 15 because it's hard to describe how this warps. But anyway, that's the 15th gate. So the thing to realize about it is, this is the thing that's pulling it all together. I mean, this is the mechanism. So the moment you have 3 people together, this is where the mechanism is at work to pull the vortex together. Now, of course, if you've got 3 people together and they don't have a 15, doesn't mean that they don't come into a penta. It just means the penta itself will not be stable. It just won't be stable. So they'll come together and go apart. And we see this all the time. In other words, an elevator, whatever. You see this phenomena all the time where there's nothing that's really there to hold it together. Where the lack of a 15 is difficult is in families. If you don't understand, one of the most powerful things that I was able to do in my family practice work is to talk to a family, for example, that doesn't have a 15 and say, look, it's okay that you don't really all hang together. It's okay that everybody wants to be off on their thing. It's okay that you can't really hold together as a group, that your house is not necessarily a place where everybody is always together. It's all right. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world. What happens to most people in Pentas, because in family Penta, the moment there's a gap, that is no 15, then for the family that becomes a problem. So what happens to these families is they try to compensate for what's not there, and they can't. They turn it into a problem. They force the children to be together with them when they themselves don't want to be together. And of course, there's all this tension that builds and discomfort that's there because of that. It's deeply important to understand what happens to you, and particularly your family associations, happens to you in these environments. Okay, so that's a 15. If we look to the other side, that is the aura stabilizer, this is over here. This is called coordination. This is the 29th gate, what we know of as the 29th gate in design. And everything about, the 46th, everything about that is about understanding that on the two sides we have two things. One is pull the aura together into a vortex. Okay? So we have, let's say, 3 people. You pull the aura together into a vortex. And what the 46 does is harmonizes it. Now, another word would be homogenizes it. Think about it this way. You can have a situation where individuals don't like each other and yet get along perfectly well in certain groups. They get along perfectly well in certain groups. But if you put the two of them together outside of that group, and all of that is about the presence of the 46th gate, because the presence of the 46th gate says, make nice. Hey, everybody makes nice. It actually takes, technically, it takes the auras that it's bringing in and it literally compresses them together. It harmonizes them, pulls them into a flow. Because you see, the moment that you're in a Penta, the Penta dynamic is at work. It's trying to move you in a direction. Now, I want to go back a second. And this drawing here, behind me, if you look at a human design chart, and you look at the energy flow in a human design chart, it can flow anyway. There is no, it starts here, or, it can go anywhere. The energy is multi-directional. We'll move back and forth in the channels. We'll move in any direction in the graphing. That's true for any biological form. That's true for any enclosed aura. It is not true for Penta. Penta is really unusual in this way. And what makes it even more unusual, not only is it unidirectional, but look at this illustration carefully. You'll see there's a space here on either side. Now remember, this is being derived from the original body graph. And in the original body graph, the 46 is in the G center, the 15 is in the G center. But if you're looking here at this dynamic, you see that there are these open spaces here. In other words, this is not a human being. It's not our body graph. And that the energy is going down, and then the energy is flowing upwards. This is the whole thing to grasp about this. It also means that there can be certain dilemmas. For example, let's say that you have the 15th gate and you don't have, for example, the 5 on the other side. That 15 gets isolated and doesn't get to move through with the rest of the flow. In other words, this is a unidirectional thing. Everything about Penta, everything that happens to us when we're in a group, it goes along with today's today's program. It's all about progress. It's about pentic progress. Pentic progress is, everybody's organized and moving. And everybody is organized and manifesting. because everything about the Penta is about going out and demonstrating who you are. You know, one of the bizarros of that, for example, if you look at the top here in the middle, this is public relations. Now, basically what this is about is that this is where the family shows off together. You know, where you see the family out together, you know, parading, you know, that kind of thing where you see them on the street, you know, and they're all together and chugging along. This is that classic demonstration of we are a family and we're terrific and all that stuff. You particularly see that in parks on Sunday, you know, with people and their babies and the carriages and the families and the kids playing and all this stuff. But if you don't have that, if there's a hole there, if there's no activation there, you got a family that never goes out together. I mean, not never, rarely. You don't have a family that does that. And of course, what happens in all groups, whatever is missing becomes the problem. And again, what you get is families that will overreact. There's something wrong here. We should really be out there together. You know, we're a family. We should be like a family, blah, blah, blah. And of course, everybody hates it. I mean, everybody hates it because it's not what's there in the mechanics. It just isn't there. But people don't know this. They think it's a problem. What's wrong with you? You don't want to be with the family, you know? All this stuff, you know, well, human beings. Okay, so it's a unidirectional energy. It's the thing that's really so incredible about it, is understanding how powerful this actual mechanism is. All right, go back to the next one. When you're looking at this graphing, what you get to see is that in this particular example, I think it's from one of the groups because I broke you all up into pentas so I could show you. Basically what you see is the activations that you have that fit into this matrix. So if you know your design and you look at that, for example, Leslie, you're a classic example. You don't have anything in there. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You are not a Penta person, you know? If you look at your design and you don't see any activations between the sacral center and the throat center, and you don't have anything there, stay away from groups. You know, be very, very clear that the small group is something that is really going to have impact for you. But I want to show you something about the way this works. There are two kinds of Penta people. There are people who can be in a Penta because they simply have activations in the Penta. So at least they have something in that sense that they connect to in terms of their pentic life. And there are those people who have definition in the Penta, and particularly definition in the upper half of the Penta. Very interesting thing about Pentas. If you only have definition in the bottom half of the Penta, you're always going to be managed. So you only have activations in the bottom of the Penta, and you happen to be the parent in a family, and your child has definition in the upper part of the Penta, and your child is going to manage you. Don't do that today. You don't have time for that. Not really. So you can be a Penta person and have definition in the bottom half of the Penta, and you're going to be managed to death. In business, we talk about people who have that. You have to manage them. You got to micromanage them. Micromanage them. You know, you have to tell them how much toothpaste to put on, you got to micromanage them. If you're in the top half, you think you're the boss. If you got definition in the top half, it's like, hey, this is my group. You know, and you're going to do what I say, or whatever it is, because, of course, those are all the areas in which the role of the family gets expressed, or the role of the group gets expressed. So it's not just about whether you have activations in the Penta or not. It's where they are as well, because it's going to make a difference in how you feel when you're going to be in those small groups. You know, everything about the Penta is about the future. If you strip away the sort of big brother scary thing about Penta, you can see that basically this is what's kept humanity going. I mean, it gives us the ground rules for how we live together. It controls the way in which we live together without us ever having to be taught that, or ever having a chance to actually be able to rebel against it, because we don't even know that we're being controlled in that way, but it's what it does. And it controls us to keep on expanding biologically and keep on dominating our environment. But more than that, it underlines something very unique in a sense about human beings. The Penta is so deeply, deeply competitive. It is this competition, Darwinian in that sense, the survival of the fittest and all this stuff. It is so powerful, this drive in the Penta. It begins on the upper part here on the left, where you see pattern fixing, administration, discipline, these kinds of things. It's the 31st gate. And basically what it represents is that the Penta is here to establish the pattern for the future, which means it's there to establish the pattern for the children. In other words, there is all this, what are you going to do for the children? What are the plans for the children? We don't have families that, the children grow up and they just do things or go or whatever. We have all this structuring that we put into them. We educate them with a certain direction in mind. We encourage that. Not only that, materially, we have to be able to put aside the resources to be able to afford those things. Again, remember, Penta is deeply, deeply material. See, where the material is right down here. The 14th gate. 14th gate. 14th gate, possession in great measure. This is an incredible gate. The 14 and the 2, and actually you can see it better in the previous illustration. This here, this central channel, allows all the information on this side and all the information on this side to flow upward. The 14th gate actually is a hub that takes in all of this information and energy and puts that energy to work. It is the 14th gate that provides the resources. So let me give you an example. You have a family, the 2 is the vision. It's the direction. It's what you do. So you've got resources and you got a vision, all related to the family. Now, if you have a family that has the 214, that's a no-brainer. There is always enough material available to be able to do the things that are necessary to do to fulfill the direction of the family. Whatever level that is, by the way. However, if you don't have the 14, you're always going to struggle. Always. And it doesn't matter how successful you are. The family that doesn't have the 14 isn't necessarily poor. But the family that has the 14 is always looking for that extra bit of material because it seems like they never have enough. Because that's what it is. There's no 14. There's no resources. And it's not about whether you can make money or not, you're skilled or not, talented or not. Remember, Penta and Wa don't care about you as individuals. They're not there to support your individual thing. They're there to get you to conform to the demands of whatever the auric construct needs. No 14. You've got kids who are always saying, but I want this, and I want that, and I want this, and I want that. And parents having to say, but I can't. And the kids being upset, why can't you? And the whole problem with, you didn't give me the chances that I needed and the opportunities that I could have had and blah, blah, blah. Then you have the family that has a 14, but it happens to be their child, and the child gets to 17 and goes to university. And the family was fine, making good money, looking after things, being able to prepare for that university education. The moment the kid goes off to school, the father loses his job. And you don't know how many times this happens, over and over and over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, this family is struggling. And they're struggling because, boof, the 14's gone. It's like a family that has a 14 and there's no 2. Well, if there's no 2, none of this stuff at the bottom gets to the top. There's no fulfilling of energy, no fulfilling of that vision. See, it's all energy flow. And it's all about money. Isn't that a funny thing, See, human beings are not about money. Individual humans, they're really not. Oh, yes, of course, we need to eat this and that and all that stuff. But we are not fundamentally materialistic as creatures, not rapacious materialism. It is the Penta that wants more than it needs. It is the Penta that says, if I can take all the wealth, then only my family will be great and only my descendants will rule. You know how many times you've seen this historically? You can see it in the world today. There are families still today that are doing that. Look at Kyrgyzstan, these places where you've got, enormous levels of corruption in which the leading families are sucking up, every ounce of money for their gene pool. This is not human. This is Penta. It's one of the things that so stunned me when I went deep into this work, because basically as an integration being, my feeling about human beings was not a very nice one. The world is a pretty ugly place. A lot of terrible things go on out there. And you look at the nature of the average human being and you see what they have been capable of and what they are capable of, and you look at that, and it's really difficult. It's only when you see it in this context do you understand that we are indeed innocent. It's one of the beautiful things about understanding Penta, is to understand what this form principle has done to us in terms of changing our basic personalities so that we're locked into this pentic aggressiveness for more and more and more and more and more. And we all know this. If you have a child, you want your child to have the best. You don't want them to be limited. You want them to go forth and do well and multiply and, it's built into what it is to live in this world of these forms. And it's something deeply important to understand about the nature of Penta. It is an incredible material drive that is there. That's why it was so easy to adapt this knowledge to business work, to understanding, how to make small groups and businesses more efficient. But it's much more important, at least from my perspective, to understand it within the context of sociology, to begin to help people recognize what happens to them in these environments so that they can begin to save themselves from it. Because in fact, it brings out the worst in us. I see that in family analysis all the time. These gaps that are there that create the dilemmas that the family gets lost in. It's brutal. And there's so much suffering that goes on in families because of materialism. Most of the pain in families is rooted to materialism. The struggles, the fight, all of that stuff. The demands that are there. The family without the 14, the demands are always going to be there. Always, always, always. Where is it? I want it. I want to have it too. All that stuff. And you have to see that it's very important for you as individuals to preserve the integrity of your awareness of what you are and not get caught blindly in what this does, but to be able to see it. Seeing it is an amazing thing. Okay, so look, what happens basically is we have three things that go out here. First of all, the pattern fixing. This is just discipline administration, but basically what it's saying is part of our resources, 1/3 of all the resources of this unit has to go for development in the future. In other words, the Penta puts an enormous amount of investment in children. For the Penta, the children and their future is enormously important. As a matter of fact, 2/3 of this, presentation, demonstration that you get at the top of the Penta is really about the kids. On the administrative side, it is simply about children need to have a plan, they need to be disciplined, they need to have a future, they need to be trained, they need to be educated. All of those things are built into it. Now again, the other side of that is who is actually there. If your children are the ones that are activating that, it's very different than if it's the adults that are activating that. I mean, we'll talk about that when we go deeper. The other side of this, what's called in the business the oversight, or what we see here is experience retention. This is about the connection to the genetic family. The connection to the genetic family. In other words, Penta isn't just interested in moving forward and establishing the next generations and their viability, but holding on to and keeping in contact with the previous generations for continuity, and particularly for the benefit of the children. So, for example, if you have, this is the 33 and the 13. If you have the 33rd, if you don't have this gate up here, this experience retention or whatever, there is no strong tradition in your family. These are often families that have lost contact with the previous generations. What we get now with, multi-generational families that don't live together anymore, that don't have the same kind of contact that they used to have. That what you have here in the 3313, in this zone over here, is the Penta going to the grandparents on Sunday. That's what this is. It's really what it represents. And it represents the family establishing with their previous or their originating family, establishing their success. When you take your kids to your parents' house, you dress them up. I mean, you make sure they look good, don't you? You try to put on nice clothes and you give them that little bits of advice, don't be rude, and blah, 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 and you're going to grandma's house or whatever the case may be. But it is fundamental in the Penta that there is this continuity with the past. I mean, what's interesting about the Penta is this far side over here is all about the inside of the house, the inside world. Right? That's the logic side. On the abstract side, it's about the outside world. For example, this gate here, this is all about going out into the world. If you don't have that 29th gate, you're not interested in going out into the world. You're not interested in going out and shopping and seeing things or whatever. You're not. But if it's there, again, I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about in a Penta. You have a Penta and you have an open gap here, and somebody says, let's go shopping together. Not going to work. It's the same thing with going to see grandma. I know families that I've done analysis and I get there and there's nothing there, right? In either place, 33, 13, nothing there. These are people who totally lost contact with their families. No longer deal with them, no longer talk to them. This kind of thing where you're totally disconnected from them. Again, it's about, the Penta is all about genetic continuity. I mean, that's its whole story. We come out of this line. This is our history. This is where our tradition is. It's about maintaining the individual tradition of the family. As a matter of fact, what you get to see in 13s now, in this accounting, is what you get to see now, in which people are constantly taking, video clips and photographs and all of these things, family history, collecting all of this, information about the family. This is part of it in the Penta, to have this historical referencing point. So you need to see the old pictures of the parents and the grandparents and where they came from, and, all of that stuff. It's part of Penta continuity, because the Penta is saying our gene pool is the best, and we're going to maintain it, and we're going to push it forward, and we're going to show that we are a great representative of this genetic line. Look at what we've done with our children. Look how successful we are. We paint our house, blah, 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 all that stuff. The whole story. So when you're dealing with small group aura, you have to understand how powerful this is. It's not about seeing it in family. It's about understanding that this is taking place every time you're together in a small group. Every time. If you're 5 people together in a small group, the 2 oldest carry the mother, father. You get a whole drama that gets lived out, even though you don't have anything to do with all of that, because it's built into the mechanism the moment that you bring those auras together. It's quite something. Okay, let's have a break.